the domestic abuse bill was going through Parliament for a number of years, and it's now an act. And one of the key measures is this accommodation-based duty. This duty is designed to ensure that there is sustainable funding, particularly for refuge, which is the kind of provides the lion's share of accommodation-based support for domestic abuse survivors and their children. But this duty also enables local authorities to commission non-refuge provision, because not everybody is able to access refuges, as Jane just said. So there are a number of other categories for provision, including dispersed accommodation, which is safe self-contained accommodation, but with the same level of specialist domestic abuse support as provided within a refuge. Sanctuary schemes, which is where local authorities might sort of put sort of locks on windows and sometimes panic buttons and that sort of thing. So not so relevant for you, but also move on and or second stage accommodation, which is temporary accommodation, but also includes sort of specialist domestic abuse support before moving on to fully independent and permanent accommodation. So I think that sort of the shared lives scheme could fit within dispersed or move on second stage, depending on exactly what the client requires. The consultation on the statutory guidance is currently out, and I can put a link to that in the chat after this. £125 million is the first year allocation for this. Unfortunately, we don't think this is quite enough because Women's Aid figures show that about 173 million is required just for refuge provision. But it is the very first sort of long-term sustainable fund that the government has sort of guaranteed in this area. So that in itself is quite exciting. Obviously, we want to make very, very clear that safe accommodation is not generic accommodation. So working with Shared Lives, we try to ensure that survivors that were placed with hosts were being supported by frontline specialist charities, but also that the accommodation itself and the way in which a survivor is supported within that it does have a real understanding of domestic abuse. So those workers, or in this case, the hosts, have training to understand what the sort of specialist needs might be for that individual. And clearly the pilot has shown that hosts have given huge support to those that have been living with them in a way that simply can't be provided at the moment. One of the key things is that any kind of support needs to meet both the MHCLG quality standards, and we would also say the Women's Aid national quality standards. There's also violence against women and girls quality standards too, but that's not provided for within this duty. So this probably isn't quite as relevant to you, but that second bullet point, which is that support and safe accommodation should sit alongside and complement the support that is already available to victims. It's not about replacing any other forms of specialist support that a victim might have. So it's not just about saying we're going to dump this person in some accommodation and then expect them to survive on their own. So yeah, that's really the kind of key outline of what the accommodation-based duty is. And I think from our perspective at Safe Lives, as an organisation, we're a second-tier charity, so we don't provide frontline services, but we're always very, very interested in innovative practices, and we also hold the largest data set of domestic abuse cases in the country. And we know, speaking to many survivors, that refuge is not right or appropriate for them. But in particular, because we do a lot of work on vulnerability and unmet need in survivors, we know that there are some for whom refuge is never going to work for them, particularly those with complex needs, whether that's mental health or drug or alcohol misuse, but also younger survivors who may, for example, have young children, may themselves have been in care, for example, and really need that sort of family environment to get a bit of stability and a bit of understanding about how to move forward in their lives. We also know that there are many older victims of abuse who will often refuse to move out of their abusive situation because they don't want to leave the one family member they have who's the abuser. So from that perspective as well, we think that these shared lives sort of partnerships and host situations could be incredibly important in that respect. So just wanted to really kind of flag that as a key opportunity coming up for this project to be able to be embedded in local areas. And we will be working with the team at Shared Lives to really make the best case for this at a national level, as well as, you know, supporting in any way we can at a local level too. And we know we're already making sure that the presentations we do to local authorities that we work with and who are asking us for advice and support on this particular duty, we're making sure that they know that Shared Lives is a potential option, and suggesting that they should be speaking to local partners where necessary. So more than happy to answer any questions or get your reflections too. Thanks for listening.
Great, thank you, Jess. So what do you think schemes could do to kind of offer themselves to the local authority to say, yes, we're here and we can support survivors? What are the next steps?
Well, I think that there's obviously, you know, some good detail from the report that you've produced. And I think that, you know, just getting in touch with either their sort of Director of Housing or local violence against women and girls leads who'll be overseeing the rollout of this particular duty to express an interest in being sort of part of the conversation. So the next few months up until October, local authorities are very, very busy understanding the needs in their local area, pulling together a strategy to meet those needs, and then bringing together the right partners for something called the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board. And that board will oversee the rollout of the duty. I think taking them in turn, obviously, Shared Lives providers will have an understanding of the needs of certain groups in your local area. So if that is something that you could actually go to the local authority and say, well, actually, we know we support X number of people with mental health issues. We already support domestic abuse survivors in our accommodation options. Often the local authority will already have a relationship with you. And so I think just it's about kind of opening their minds to the fact that, you know, you are now in this space, because I'm sure most local authorities will see you in a specific space, but not the domestic abuse one. So it's about sort of saying, you do realise that this can actually work really, really well with certain groups of survivors, and starting those conversations. Obviously, in terms of the strategy, unmet need is really, really important, and those particular vulnerable categories where you've got protected characteristic groups as well. So if you think about disability and learning disability, if you think about particularly older victims that age is a protected characteristic as well, the duty says that local authorities have to make sure there's adequate provision for those specific groups who have protected characteristics. So that's another angle of thinking about it, which is actually we can help you to meet your objectives in a way that actually sometimes refuge can't. So it's not saying that this is an alternative to refuge in all forms. It's just saying that we know there will always be some groups who can't access refuge, and we can sort of be part of that mixed economy of provision that many local authorities will require. So yeah, really it's just about starting those conversations, isn't it? Because I think for a lot of local authorities, this will all be very new to them, first of all. So, you know, you sort of getting your voice in the mix will be really helpful, I think, for them. So they shouldn't want to turn you away, because this is a problem that they're probably thinking through going, how do we solve?
Great, that's really helpful. They've got until October to make that plan, haven't they? So this is why we're kind of promoting it amongst schemes. Jess, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in. Bob and Jill, thank you so much, and Anne as well, for joining us. You've been part of the brave cohort of Shared Lives schemes that have got involved with the Domestic Abuse Project, and it would be great to hear about your experiences. Bob and Jill, should we start with you, and you could talk us through why you got involved in the project at the beginning, and some of your experiences, the challenges and the successes that you had. Yeah, what can you tell us?
Well, initially we were approached by Ali from Shared Lives Plus to say that there had been certain level of funding from the Joint Local Authority Initiative Group, and they were looking to provide support for people who would experience domestic violence within a shared life setting. So what happened then is we'd been thinking about it for a while anyway, and obviously I discussed it with Jill. My name's Bob Bell, by the way. I'm the service manager of Shared Lives and Jill's the team manager. So we discussed it, and we just felt that Shared Lives would be a brilliant option for people who experience domestic violence or domestic abuse. We've also got our turnaround team and our Ruby team within PSS. So we were able to sort of link in with them to say this has been a suggestion and what do you think? And they said it was a great idea. We did a little bit of work with the Ruby team prior to getting any referrals, just explaining what Shared Lives is, what it can provide, what kind of service it is. So they were able to sort of look at the referrals they were getting to see who would be suitable.
I think, all the referrals, we offered them all in place. A couple didn't take them up, but a lot of them did.
Yeah.
Are there challenges in terms of like getting shared lives carers who perhaps traditionally supported people with a learning disability to support someone with domestic abuse, or was it blurred, or how did you find it in practice?
The shared lives carers were brilliant. They were really up for it. Yeah, they were like, yeah, okay, let me know if what you need. So when we would get a referral, and we had a couple of maybe 3 or 4 shared lives carers that were really interested, and we would, when we got the person in, depending on where the shared lives carer lived, the area that the person wants to go to. But yeah, we would just ring them up, and they were like, yeah, okay. So I mean, we must have. I mean, I can't really remember. I think we placed about 8 people, and they were just, most of them were real success stories. Some people only stayed for, one person stayed for 2 weeks. We had a person that stayed for actually 8 months, and has only just, she did decide to go back to the family home, but she said she'd learned a lot while she was at the arrangements, and she had made lots of decisions in her own mind what she wanted to do, and she did return back home. But the scheme finished in the end of March, and we worked with the local authority, and they actually funded the scheme for an extra 12 weeks. It funded
that's fantastic.
For an extra 12 weeks, yeah.
I'm kind of, I will bring Anne in now. It'd be great to hear from you, Anne, a little bit, because you're in slightly a different situation about building relationships with the local authorities. Like, did you have to do lots of groundwork to get the pilot off the...
Yeah, so we were there originally in when did we start? 2016, 2017, and everybody just kept slamming doors in our faces. Nobody would fund anything. We went to the refuge. We had a few battles with them because they just saw us as a complete threat. And it took a long time to say, we are not coming in. You are the expertise here. We need you. So we actually, we're just talking about the types of accommodation. We actually only took on one, what they call dispersed accommodation referral. The rest were all move on places from the refuge team, which worked fantastically well because we were clearing up the beds in the refuge, especially through the pandemic, that they needed that expertise that we haven't got because, they've been doing it for God knows how many years. And the ladies weren't ready, to still go it alone. We had the battles with the housing to make sure that we were seen as still as a domestic abuse service because I had to argue that we were still to be classed, the ladies were still to be classed as gold banded. I had battles with everybody walking this planet.
What was like the change what changed their minds on it? Like, how did you...
Ali Miller changed people's minds because Ali Miller got funding, and that's what happened. As soon as Ali was appointed, funding appeared, and then as soon as the pressure was taken off people for me going, I need money for this lady, everybody then started to show a bit more of an interest as to how they could help us, because I think that, the pressure was off them. The police were amazing. I mean, my advice to anybody that's thinking of doing it, you need to talk to these people that have got the background knowledge. So I spoke to the police. At every person I placed, I got a gazetteer. I never know if I'm saying that right, so apologies. I was hoping.
What is it, Anne? Could you explain?
So it's a mark on the person's house, on the carer's house, that if anybody ever phoned 999, it would be an instant response. So I did that to provide the safety for my carers, you know, because we were just going, some of my carers, fantastically for the person that they were supporting, lived in the middle of nowhere. However, it's very secluded if some perpetrator decided to come knocking on the door and find out where they were living. So the police were fantastic with that, because again, we're providing a service that's helping them place these people and keeping these, we only supported ladies to start with, ladies safe. The dispersed accommodation person, the reason we took her and not refuge, she was very, very high risk, and probably much higher risk than I really wanted to take. But then I met her, and then of course once you've met someone, you've just got to help them. So but the reason she wouldn't leave the partner and the reason she couldn't go to refuge was because she had a dog, and so my host said she would take the dog, and that was it. We had another lady who didn't come to us, but there was we did the legwork for her, who was coming because she couldn't leave a partner because of the horse. So we got somebody who got a field so that we placed a horse, all these things that obviously refuge can't deal with. But you know, yeah.
Shared lives is pretty adaptable in that respect.
Oh, completely and totally. Like you guys, Jill and Bob, were saying, our carers were absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I think we had that on as well with the dog, you know, that they were really good. The carers were saying, yeah, we'll take the dogs. So
yeah.
we have one that we couldn't place the dog because it was a big bulldog, and it was really protective over the person. So we couldn't, and she wouldn't go without the dog, and I totally get that. I wouldn't go without mine either. So yeah.
Are there any things that you'd say to the schemes who perhaps is the first time they've been hearing about this, or they know their local authority is kind of trying to make this domestic abuse plan by October, and what would you say to other schemes that are listening today?
Oh yeah, definitely give it a go, because it's something different, you know, that we different that we've worked with, because we're normally, as you say, it's not, we haven't, it's a new thing, working with women with domestic violence, but it's so satisfying as well when you see these women, you know, they come to us, they stayed as long as they needed to, they got the support they needed, and then they moved out and they gave us some great feedback, you know, and the carers were really up for it as well. Yeah. Try.
I think all the positive changes that we saw in people in a very short period of time, and as I say, with the Ruby team, the caseworkers have been working with these people for quite a long time, and they were just amazed of how their personalities changed, their demeanour changed, everything. You know, it was positive. I think for me, it's just working closely with maybe a DV service to support the shared life service as well. Yeah. Because we're not experts in the DV field, but we are experts in the shared lives field, and I think working in partnership together really proved worthwhile. And as Jill said, it provided, we've got lots of good stories that we can share with their permission. So some of the stories are amazing. About one of the people has sort of got an interest in astronomy now, because the carer's husband had a telescope in the garden, and she didn't want to leave because she wanted to see the Christmas star. So there's all those nice stuff that comes out of it. But at the end of the day, when you think about what the service is and what we're trying to do, it's really sort of positive, isn't it?
Yeah, I think another thing I'd just like to add, we did at one point have two women staying in the same place with the carer, and they really supported each other. You know, so that was a really good thing as well. So yeah.
Thank you. And do you have any thoughts about what people should say to local authorities, or what you'd say to the schemes thinking about it?
Well, the pilots have proven that it works, because we've all got success stories. You know, apart from one of my ladies, they've all now live independently in accommodation. They have all got jobs. 2 have got new relationships, and they, because of the nurturing environment that they lived in, it showed how to do it. So, you know, we've just got to, which I know we'll all quite happily, I mean, Ali's done a fantastic report that you know, Jane can share, that documents all these ladies' lives and the difference they've made. And we're cheaper. We're cheaper. My refuse provided me with some figures to show to commissioners how much cheaper just taking a lady out of the situation, because it's against the hospital, it's against the police, it's all these add-on extras that these commissioners aren't seeing. So, you know, and to what we get paid for our carers, for our hosts, it's pittance without the safety element and the duty of care they have to these individuals.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on this morning. It's been really inspiring and kind of amazing to hear about it all. I'm sure other schemes will be interested to hear you know, more about it in more detail further on. We're like Jess and Jane said, we're producing the report and a briefing to go to the Minister of Safeguarding and Housing shortly, and we're going to invite one of them to chair a public webinar. So we'll have a similar kind of longer time to talk about the project within Shared Lives in the next couple of months. So schemes, you're more than welcome to come to that as well, and to invite your commissioners along to it, because it will be really exciting. So yeah, watch this space on the domestic abuse front. And a huge thank you to Anne, Bob and Jill and everyone else who's been working in that area as well.